Welcome to my round 3 report on the Tartar Steel chess tournament played in Wijk aan Zee in the Netherlands. I'm going to take you through a couple of games, some snippets from a couple of games. So first of all, I'd like to look at the game between Luc van Wely and Anish Giri, the all-Dutch battle. Of course, there's friendly rivalry between them, and they always have very interesting games. Luc van Wely, with the white pieces, already has tremendous initiative. He played the rook across, hitting the queen, and Giri, well, he's gone wrong. He's already in trouble here. The queen had to go back, and Luc brought the knight forward, so you can see all his pieces are in play. Very dangerous indeed. And Black's problem here, of course, is that he's not developed. His queenside development is lagging behind, so it's going to be very difficult to protect his king. If the bishop comes out now, then, well, white could keep attacking, but a very simple way to play the position is simply to shift the rook across and you take a pawn for nothing. You're going to pick this one up very soon. White's just a clear pawn up. So basically Black has to take on c3 if he's going to stand a chance in this game. And now, if white recaptures, well, that would slow things down. I mean, white would still be better there, but it's far better to press on straight away. f5 is an excellent move. The bishop is locked in. It can't now come to e6 to try and neutralise the danger of this bishop on b3. And of course, white wants to press on further in a moment with f6. So the only thing that Black can do here, as he can't develop his pieces, is just to keep taking and hope for the best. So at least he has this pawn on b2, which of course is always hanging over the head of Van Wely here. It reminds me a little bit of the Anand Carlsen Game 9 World Championship game, where Carlsen also had this b-pawn coming down the board. Okay, was a very slightly different story, but still. But okay, the reason that Van Wely has allowed his queenside to disappear is because he wants to keep attacking with f6. Now, the basic idea behind this move, it's all down to concrete calculation, or concrete variation. So let's have a look at one. What happens if Black makes a queen? Well, if this is taken, then of course the knight is on prise in the middle of the board. But the big idea behind f6 is to play queen g6, which forces checkmate. You can see the queen can't be captured because of the pin. And on the next turn, queen takes g7. A classic checkmating idea. So after f6, it's absolutely forced. Black has to play bishop e6. It's his best chance. And here, well, let me show you what happened in the game, and then we'll return to this position. Van Wely took on g7, which looks very natural, and Giri recaptured. And now Van Wely swung his rook up the board, and this looks as though it should be fatal. If the king steps aside, then simply rook g3 anyway. The queen has to maintain protection of the pawn here. Let's say queen here. And yes, queen e5. That's a very simple winning move, and that's the end of the game. So let's just go back. In this position, after rook f3, Giri played rook c8. It's the only move, but this is a saving move. Suddenly Black has sufficient counterplay with the b-pawn. So he gave up his queen, but came down with the rook c1. Now, I mean, perhaps white could do a little bit better here, but basically probably Black has enough to save the game now, certainly in this variation. Basically, Van Wely makes sure that he has a perpetual check here. He didn't risk anything else. So now there's a threat of knight f6 check and mate. So black has to stop that. Now white is a whole rook down here, and there's nothing better than to force perpetual with queen g5. And so on, and that was a draw. But if we go back to this moment, this was the critical position in the game, and white can win here. It's a very nice idea. First take on e6, then you give a check, the king goes in the corner, and now knight g5 is a winning move. The threat is this. Let's suppose black brings the knight over. Now we can see the idea. Queen g6, threatening queen h7 mate, of course, and if the knight comes here, then we hack that off very quickly, and if the knight is taken, then queen h5 is mate. Incidentally, in this position, if white tried queen g6 first, with the idea knight g5, that wouldn't be as good, because then there's queen d3, and that's an annoying pin. But knight g5 looks like a winning move. If black plays queen d3 to stop the queen going to g6, then simply knight takes e6. And, well, there could be an attack on the g7 pawn, but probably, yeah, knight takes rook is going to win very easily, and we should be able to take care of this b pawn, and white should be winning that very easily. So, Van Wely missed a very clear win there. In the first couple of rounds of my Wijk aan Zee reports, I showed you really nice attacking games, and I was saying that it's much easier to attack than defend. Well, it looks like attacking is pretty difficult as well. Basically, chess is difficult. I think that's what we can conclude. Okay, and let me show you one more snippet from a game. And this was the game between Giri and Nakamura and Boris Gelfand. Now, they've had some great tussles over the past few years. Most recently in London, in the final of the London Chess Classic Rapid Play tournament, where Giri Nakamura was a very convincing winner. But in classical games over the last couple of years, Boris Gelfand has done very well over Nakamura, and today he seemed to have a very nice position. So Gelfand with black has pressure on this c4 pawn, also a bit of pressure on the king side, and this is a very poor bishop. This is an excellent bishop, potential strong pass pawn. Well, let's see what happened. Gelfand took on g4, and this is an example of how difficult it is to defend a position. Now, how should you recapture here? Positionally, this looks rather dubious to recapture with the f-pawn, because suddenly this pawn is isolated, and that could give black additional attacking options. For example, maybe we'll double on the h-file, switch the bishop to this diagonal, then who knows, maybe f5 comes into consideration, and followed by g4 if this is taken. It's very difficult for white to defend this, but I mean, maybe he can get some kind of blockade, but it's certainly not simple at all. Therefore, in this position, after h6 g4, I think very understandably Nakamura recaptured with the h-pawn, keeping everything together, making sure that this e-pawn has sufficient protection from the f-pawn. Gelfand exchanged rooks, and now if rook takes, then the c-pawn drops, therefore king takes. But now black has a nice idea. Gelfand broke with d5. Now, of course, black isn't giving up anything here, there's a pin. But the idea is to give black some scope along this diagonal, and this is now very tricky indeed. And the rook switched to the h-file, and now here, well, we'll see what happens in a second, but basically probably white should defend this f-pawn. This looks like a very craven defensive move, but it's probably necessary. Nakamura played queen b1, which looks like a pretty decent move actually, to claim squares on this diagonal also threaten the bishop because now the rook is defended. And in the game this worked out very well, and Nakamura was able to force an exchange of rooks. And although he's still worse in this position and had to find some very good moves, basically he managed to draw this queen endgame. This was very hard to win when there are always perpetual ideas against the king. But let's go back to this position, because this is where Boris missed his big chance. Now, I think in a game this will be very, very hard to see. But bishop takes f3 is a winning move. Let's see what happens. Of course, white has to take this to stay on the board. And now e4 check. Brilliant idea. The point of this is just to open diagonals. To open this diagonal. But also to give black another check. We'll see in a second. Now if king takes, then the net closes on the king and simply queen e5 is going to be mate. So bishop takes is forced. And now incredibly this check is going to force checkmate. First thing to note is that white can't interpose with the queen because of queen takes rook. Now there are various ways to get out of check. Let's see what happens if let's go with king g2 first of all. Now that will give black the chance to swing the queen across. Now there are some very delicate footsteps here, but eventually black can force the king to a bad square. And now here rook h2 is probably winning, but the best move is rook h4. And remarkably, this is a very slow motion attacking method, but there is no decent defense to taking here. And then either a checkmate on g1 or a winning check on f4. Basically, white can't bring his queen across because the rook is still on prise, and if the rook tries to defend here, then the bishop is on prise. So bishop d3, blocking out the queen for the moment. But now this is a winning move. So first of all, the king has to keep hold of the bishop, and then a check. Now if the king goes up, then we've seen this already, this idea, the king is stuck, and it's queen f4 mate, and you can see the queen simply cannot connect with the defense. So king d1 is forced, another check. Now the king can't come back this way because the rook is on prise, so the king has to defend. Of course, king c2, queen c3 would have been mate. And here, I mean, who knows, maybe Boris got this far and couldn't see a way through. Remarkably, queen a5 is a winning move. Again, king c2, queen c3 is mate, so the king has to come across. And now rook check, and now the king is forced to a bad square. If king f1, then queen d2 is going to be mate. And now this is very nice. After king f3, the queen switches back, and now a little quiet move, queen b8, and there's no defense to queen f4 mate. I mean, this is absolutely brilliant. And of course, there was computer assistance with these variations. You know, a strong computer program will spew out the solution to this very quickly. Of course, when you're sitting at the board and you've been playing for 4 hours and you're having to calculate these variations, well, first of all, even seeing bishop f3 and the follow-up moves, I mean, that's difficult in itself. But to calculate these variations, well, at some point you might just think, well, this simply isn't working. Anyway, only Boris can say what he did or didn't see. But yes, I'm coming back to my theme, which is defense is difficult, but attacking is difficult too. It's not very not easy to spot these ideas when you just have one chance. Well, it was a very interesting round 3. So those 2 games were drawn. There were 2 decisive games. Hari Krishna defeated Dominguez in a beautiful technical game, and likewise Caruana against Kariakin. Caruana won a very nice positional game. So those were the two winners. And now there's a stack of players on 2 points. Aronian, So, Hari Krishna, Caruana, Nakamura and Giri all have 2 points. So this is going to be a very tight tournament.